Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining the new time at 6 o'clock. And it's a good thing we have our real world clocks to tell us exactly what time that is, because if we had to rely on our emotions, it would be quite different for everybody. So as we said in the last class, we're going to talk about emotional time today. We reviewed intellectual time and biological time in the last two classes. And what we know is that with clocks, they really do provide our most precise measurement of time. But at best, it really is a convenient fiction. And clocks sort of seem to present a time that ticks steadily, predictably forward, like the arrow of time. But we know that our perception of time can change radically depending on our emotions, and it can double back, it can speed up. So how we perceive time through our emotions is not at all the same as real world clocks. And in fact, it was Einstein who first posited the idea that subjective time was relative. And of course, I am not a physicist in any way, so what I am going to say is the most simplistic definition of his understanding of time. But what he said is that it is dependent on a number of factors, such as age, context, emotional state, attention, and movement. And so a sense of time really is threaded through everything that we do, and it rides on top of all of our senses. But we don't really have an organ of time. We don't have a sense of it in terms of the way the other senses work. There's no smell or vision. We don't have an organ. There are no eyes or nose of time. So that's why it's really so difficult to define. But as I mentioned last week with the tennis player Andy Roddick, the brain actually presents a tape-delayed broadcast to us. And luckily for us, that 80 millisecond delay is important because it censors a lot of the information coming to us. And so that we don't get overwhelmed. The delay is very helpful to us. And but the delay helps us to kind of bring all this sensory information together and present the most important information to us, so we know how to act, we know what to do in the world in real time. And there's a myth that says we really only use 10% of our brains. But actually what's really happening is only a small percentage of the information that the brain is processing is presented to our conscious mind. The vast majority of the information is compressed and presented to the subconscious. So again, the biological clocks that we have, those are all running on our subconscious time. So the idea is, we don't want to get overwhelmed, and our brain is very, very helpful in that way. It's advantageous to us to only have a certain amount of information presented to us. And so the idea is, with the conscious part of our brains, we can be the architects of our experience. And our feelings are a critical determinant, just as Einstein said, of that experience. So, we don't only come to know the world through our senses, but also through our emotions. And powerful emotions have the ability to distort our perception and logic of time, such as when we're in life-threatening situations where the subjective sense of time can be radically altered, seeming to slow down or expand. And I certainly remember from my accident that I can still see the slow motion movie of everything happening. It is totally burned into my brain in more ways than one, but it did happen in slow motion. And the idea, scientists say, is that when we're in these kind of situations, there's just so much information being presented to our brain that we need to process all of it, and it's information that's crucial to our survival. So our brains need to work incredibly hard. It has no familiarity with this experience, no memory of how to react. So it has to work incredibly hard. And in doing so, our perception of time is expanded, where a second can feel like 5-10 minutes and a minute can feel like an hour. So it's even more unreliable when we're enjoying ourselves. There's a saying that goes, when you're having a good time, time flies. And that's precisely because we are enjoying ourselves so much, we're not thinking about time at all. So it could be while you're playing an instrument, or for me, doing yoga, painting, it could be going for a walk. But this idea of our emotions distorting time is actually called temporal distortion. And it's not a malfunction of our brain. It's actually an illustration of its remarkable ability to adapt to events around us in real time. So, as I said, our subjective time is notoriously inaccurate, and it's clear that your perception of time is translated through your emotions. And when you're scared or challenged, then time seems to expand because your brain has to work very hard to make sense of this new experience. And I know in past classes I used the word slow down, but I think I want to move to using the word expand, because we've been talking about expansion in the other classes, expansion of awareness, expansion of understanding and a sense of abundance. And slowing down seems to have a more pejorative feel to it. So we'll use the word expand from now on. But the idea is that can we bring that same sense of challenge to our lives in a positive way, so that we can expand time, but we don't necessarily have to be in a car accident or a life-threatening situation. So last week we talked about doing a normal task, but bring this really intense awareness to it, a challenged mind in a way where everything wasn't so rote. It wasn't just into your subconscious, you just wash the dishes, you just make the breakfast, but you elevated it to the conscious mind. And no doubt, I feel time probably expanded for you. So the idea is the same when you maybe go on a trip to a new city or you take a vacation. Your brain is challenged and it wants to take in all this new information, this unfamiliar information, and hold on to it and study it and make sure it's available if we need to reuse it again, because it hasn't been processed into that familiar subconscious state. So it stays in this conscious mode, and you have to be on all the time to make sure you take the right street, get on the right train. So it's that same sort of challenged, cautious, excited, expanded awareness of things that we can bring to our daily lives, even in this COVID, stay home, stay safe, social distanced world. So let's see, I saw a talk by the executive editor of Wilderness Magazine. His name is Jedediah Jenkins. I just love that name, Jedediah. And he also talks about this idea that we need to challenge ourselves in order to expand our time without having to be in a life-threatening situation. And he says that our brain marks time when we're exposed to new experiences, which is what that is, where it's not processed by the subconscious, it's in your conscious mind. And he clarifies it, though, by saying it's not just any new experience. It's experiences that are associated, that become part of your identity. And so it needs to have a strong association with who you are. And he calls these identity anchors. And scientists think that, why you remember every song from your teenage years, because I remember every Beatles song. I can remember Traffic, I can remember the Rolling Stones, because it's a time when you're forming your identity. And when interviewed, people tend to have the strongest memories from ages 15 to 25. So when you're younger, so many things are new, right? There are so many firsts: your first date, your first kiss, you graduate from college, you take your driving test, you go on your first drive. And so these times are etched into your memories, but it's because they're part of how you identify of who you are. So they're your identity anchors. And then as we get older, there tend to be fewer firsts, right? We tend to be more stable. We tend to have a slightly more routine kind of a life. And so the idea is we don't create as many new identity anchors. And so it seems if we are to expand time, maybe we can create new challenges for ourselves, new adventures that can make life feel more dynamic, more rich, more expansive. So it's actually not that hard. We can pay attention, challenge ourselves in everyday tasks, just as we did last week, even in these social distanced times. So actually, I know this time is already quite challenging. We're having to learn new ways of coping. And so I have no doubt that we'll remember this time. But maybe we can also create new identity anchors and cultivate a beginner's mind to challenge ourselves, to create positive, new, exciting adventures. So as we did last week, again, with just trying to do it in our regular activities, but we can also try maybe learning a new skill or taking a new hobby, even just taking a new direction on your walk. I know a couple of months ago when they had closed down all the beaches and the beach bike rides, Campbell and I ride practically every weekend. I've been riding on those bike paths since we got here 15 years ago. And so it was very frustrating that we couldn't go on the bike path, and we were really forced to find a new road. And we ended up, instead of going north and south along the beach, we ended up going east along the river. And it was quite amazing. We're like, this road has been here all this time and we never found it. And to be honest, I don't remember all of my rides north and south, but I definitely remember the ride east. Another thing I'm trying to do is perfect a yoga move that I've been trying to do for a long time, but I've been trying to do a forearm stand, which is where you go upside down on your forearms. And I've been doing it against a wall for a couple of years, but it's so scary to do it without the wall. So I figure now that I have my garden, and if I fall, it won't be so bad, I've been challenging myself to try it in the garden. And yeah, it's quite scary. I've fallen a few times, but I'm very careful about how I fall. And then the other thing that I've done while I'm in this situation here of not going out very much is Campbell really did most of the cooking for most of our lives together, and he's a really good cook. And a couple of years ago, he's like, I really don't want to cook anymore. And I was like, oh, okay, because I don't know how to cook. And he goes, it's all right, you'll learn. And I said, well, I also can't smell because after my accident, the inside of my nose was damaged, and I really cannot smell at all, which came in handy when I had to change my daughter's diapers, but can be kind of scary, when you're trying to cook. I literally can't smell garlic. So I said to him, I'm glad to take it on, but you're going to have to put up with definitely a lower standard of deliciousness. And he was like, fine, and so I've been using Pinterest for a while, but last week I downloaded the New York Times cooking app, and I'm getting very adventurous and being very conscientious. I'm not just making the same 10 meals that I've made for the last 2 years. And, some are turning out better than others, but it's kind of made cooking exciting for me again. So I'm not so sure for Campbell, but anyway, maybe there are new tasks or new hobbies that you guys can take on, and then we can, maybe expand that sense of time by being challenged, finding a certain richness and abundance in that expansion. So I know they're just little things, but maybe we can create these new identity markers, right? And I'm a big believer in little things. I've always said that brick by brick, right? That's how the pyramids were built, or that's how the Grand Canyon was carved, that water carved through rock just over time, slowly but surely. So I'm a big believer in little things, so we don't have to set ourselves terribly high goals. But the idea is, maybe we can end up looking back at this time as not just challenging in a negative way, but challenging in a positive way, because we'll have made new identity markers. So there's an author named Dan Gilbert. He wrote Stumbling on Happiness, and he's also a Harvard psychologist. And he says, human beings are all works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. But time is a powerful force that transforms us. So can we use our time to challenge ourselves, to keep refining our subjective sense of time and our identity to expand and enrich our lives? So thank you. If you have any questions, let's go over it, and then otherwise we'll sit for a bit. Thank you.